My research focuses, in a nutshell, on the extent to which access to gardens or some kind of green space in the workplace, the extent to which it is beneficial for employees. And to introduce to you what I mean by that, I'll introduce you to this man here, Leon Bayliss, who, as you can see, is one of the creative service engineers at Google in London. And Leon works in a building designed by Renzo Piano. It's a rather signature building very near Tottenham Court Road. He invited me to join him for lunch on the Google roof terrace. So you can see here he is just after lunch. You can see that the terrace on top of the building has also more informal seating area where you can sit and chat to your colleagues and have coffee. And Leon also has access to one of the Google vegetable boxes. So Google provides I think it's about 25 boxes, and employees can opt to take one of these boxes and to garden it, either plant it with herbs or vegetables or flowers. And if they fail to look after the vegetable box, they forfeit their right to the box. And then the third outdoor space on top of the building is this one here, which is what they call the secret garden. This is where employees can take a break from their offices, and they can sit in one of these little pods. They can either socialise small groups or take time out by themselves. They can plug in their laptops, there are PowerPoints out there. They can admire the view. They can enjoy the flowers and other shrubs that are planted around in each little cubicle. So a variety of spaces to get outside during the working day or at the end of the day. Now, this research that I'm doing now links very closely to my doctoral research, which I completed in 2011. The title of my thesis was "The Factory in a Garden: Corporate Recreational Landscapes in England and the United States." And I'm showing you here, I hope you can just about see, it is also a roof terrace. It's the Heinz factory in Pittsburgh around 1900, and what we can see is the roof terrace for women. These are all women. And on the other side of the building, there was the roof terrace for men. You can see they were highly gendered spaces. The women's terrace was more about relaxation and privacy, and the men's area was more about physical exercise and activity. So there are clearly some important links between the reasons for making gardens today and the reasons for making gardens in the past. Of course, changing conditions means that there are new motivations for doing so. But essentially, the reasons for making gardens in the past and today were to promote a healthy lifestyle and a sense of well-being, to improve the quality of working life, to make you more motivated and productive, to provide amenities that may not be available locally. Because we're not just talking roof gardens here, we're talking about whole recreation parks where companies would provide facilities such as sports, athletics, sometimes swimming pools in some of the larger factories. So amenities that would not necessarily be available locally to the workforce. And of course to improve the aesthetic environment. All those factors were the case then and also today, but this word here, creativity, is a buzzword in the discourse about corporate space. The idea of gardens and outdoor space making spaces more conducive to creative thought. And as far as business is concerned, the businesses argue that recruitment and retention, the idea of recruiting the highest quality staff and keeping them because they're providing high quality spaces for them, to improve the identity, to present an identity of beauty and care, and also to promote the brand and ultimately for profit. So these are all the reasons that have been given for offering corporate green space. But of course, one of the problems of my research in the late 19th, early 20th century was that it was very difficult to get the views of employees. And one of the things I want to do now is to find out from employees what they think about the gardens, whether they think that they are beneficial to them. because most of the reasons that I list here come from the point of view of the employers. So these are just some of the kinds of spaces I'm looking at the moment. This King is a company that make computer games. Some of you might know Candy Crush Saga. How many of you are addicted to Candy Crush Saga? I think it's the most successful computer game ever made. And the company that makes it is King. They are in the same building as Google, and you can see they have quite a small roof terrace where lavender is strongly emphasised. Looking down from their roof terrace, I looked down on this one, which they told me was probably an advertising agency or some kind of media agency, so that's something I can explore. I certainly don't give very many marks for design of that particular terrace. Much larger recreation parks and aesthetic parks, including Vodafone at Newbury, which I've been to visit. This is actually taken during the recent flood, so they're rather Arcadian streams and lakes that actually almost threaten the buildings themselves. And then I'm also going to be looking at sites in the United States. This is one of the Google, I think it's the main Google site at Mountain View. So I'm going to be looking at the ways in which changing needs, technologies and conditions contribute to and shape our working environment, and what are those conditions exactly today. But I must add that I'm very early on in my research, so some of the points I'm going to make are speculative, and others are based on some evidence that I've collected so far. So why is this research relevant today? For a number of reasons. First of all, there's lots of discussion about where should we work in the digital age. We spend so much time on our computers, we can work anywhere we like. Lots of home working going on, working out in cafes and other sites other than the office. You might have read that recently the CEO of Yahoo banned home working. She said that it encouraged shirking, and she thought also that by bringing employees together in the workplace, it improved creative thought and innovation. So that was one view. But also we have to think about the fact that we're now spending so much time in virtual space. Do we need to spend more time in real physical space, sensory space? That's one question that I'm asking. What should our workplaces look like or feel like in the digital age? Do we need to provide a greater variety of spaces inside and outside? There's a lot of discussion and research on this question today. One of the main researchers into office space is a man at the Royal College of Art called Jeremy Myerson, and he calls these kinds of spaces the social democratic office, which he argues is a more sort of human space. I would say that this kind of very contrived, self-conscious design is actually more like dictating a kind of mode of behaviour in the workplace. It's perhaps suggesting that there's a homogeneous culture which doesn't really allow for individuality. So that's one criticism I might make of these kind of, this use of graphics to sort of impose a point of view and a mode of working on the employees. Another debate at the moment is how the working environment affects our health, motivation and creativity, and there's a lot of discussion at the moment, which Natalie is actually going to talk a lot more about the how architectural space and landscape space affect our emotions and how we feel, and how it affects not just our emotions but how we behave in the space. The exhibition Sensing Spaces at the Royal Academy is focused on those questions. How do we improve the balance of green open space and the built space in cities? Another huge discussion in urban design, sociology and other disciplines. You may or may not know that one of the avant-gardes in architecture at the moment is the idea of green skyscrapers, where their buildings are literally enveloped in foliage and plants as a way of improving biodiversity, as a way of creating a new aesthetic in the built environment. And then you've got the movement for urban farming, where we're all going to be fed by food that is grown in cities, in huge structures like skyscrapers, watered and fed by hydroponic systems, and even the cattle can graze on these kinds of structures. So this may or may not be the future. You may think it's Armageddon, you may think it's an exciting development. But I'm asking whether corporate green space will contribute to these ideas of improving the balance of green space and open space and built space in cities. And finally, debates about how we improve biodiversity in urban space. Obviously, with urbanisation, biodiversity has suffered considerably, and so there are movements to improve biodiversity, and one of the passions at the moment in London is to have beehives on the top of your building, as you can see here. Bees actually like to fly at high altitudes. They're very happy in cities as long as they have somewhere to settle. So these are many of these are a number of the debates that I'm really connecting to in my research. So the kinds of questions that I'm asking in my research, this one of course is very important, the whole debate about nature. Now nature means everything, nature's a very huge term. By nature in this context I mean an exposure to plants and to outdoor space. There is a lot of research looking at the effect of exposure, spending time in a natural environment. Again, that's also a slippery term, but an environment that is where we are connected to plants and open space. A group of researchers from Sheffield University and Rochester University in New York have done a huge research programme which argues, which concludes that exposure to nature promotes a sense of community and people are more able to nurture relationships in these kinds of environments. Now, again, I've got a lot of work to do to look up these sources. I know that Barbara Humberstone, the professor here, has done a lot of work in this area, and I'm hoping to link up with Barbara to get some assistance from her. So this idea of possibly the aesthetic, sensory, experiential, cognitive and physical qualities of gardening and gardens and outdoor recreation being valuable in the workplace for these reasons. These are other buzzwords at the moment about how we feel and how we perform in workplaces, high-performance workplaces. In other words, we perform well because the spaces in which we work are well designed and provide access to outdoor space. Psychologists have done a lot of work in this area, one of them being Judith Heerwagen, who works for the Department of Energy in the United States, has done a lot of research to show that natural elements in our working lives dramatically improve health, happiness and productivity. And then linked to that, we have the theory of biophilia, Stephen Kellett being one of the leading thinkers in this area, and this idea of looking at workplaces and other spaces. Are they alienating? Are they bland? Are they hostile? They separate us from nature. We need at least to have a window in our office that we can look out from and connect with the outside world. So these are two of the many areas of debate around the value of nature in the workplace. We then have this question of how our spaces in which we live and work, how are they changed by digital technology and living in working space? And John R. Parkinson, in his book Democracy and Public Space, has argued that despite digital technology, social networks, and the amount of time we spend in virtual space, things happen to real people in real space and time. Physical public space is essential even in our allegedly digital world. So that idea of being in real physical space. But what kind of real physical spaces do we move in? And Mark Augé, in his book Non-Places, An Introduction to Anthropology of Supermodernity, has argued that the individual is decentered from himself. In our globalized world, a world without frontiers, we inhabit places of circulation, consumption and communication. And he calls these non-places. The non-places he characterises as things like airports, shopping malls, places where he argues we don't connect with ourselves or with other people. And so the implication, therefore, is that we need to make spaces that are places rather than non-places. So the question is, should business contribute to our right to access open space? will workplace gardens provide useful, valuable, alternative social spaces? Will they promote cultures of belonging? Will they promote community life and creativity? And then, of course, there's the question of design, which I'll be looking at, because the extent to which these spaces will be useful and will work will depend on good design. All design involves narrative. And a good design tells a story, and spaces, like any other design, need narratives. This is where I start being subjective in my own taste in saying that we don't want spaces like this. In the Google offices, the gardens are filled with cupcakes. And I would argue that this is the wrong way to go. I would say that this produces a kind of Disney-style simulacra, an idea of something that is not real, and therefore it's imposing this kind of false fun culture on a workforce that will certainly not meet everybody's needs. And I would like to think more about the idea of perhaps plants and garden space being more of a neutral space, again depending on how it's designed. So that's something I want to explore in more detail. So how might corporate green space benefit employees? As I say, my plan is to conduct a large qualitative survey of employees' opinions on space. So far I've interviewed one or two people, one of whom is John Palmer, who works for King Company, the Candy Crush Saga company. I spent some time with him on the roof terrace, and he concluded that the ability to access a roof space, an outdoor space with flowers and bees, had massively improved the quality of his working life. Now, admittedly, he had only worked there for 3 weeks. He'd also joined the company in the hottest part of the summer. Last summer we had about 3 weeks of very, very hot weather. But he gave a number of very interesting reasons why he felt so strongly about this space. He said the ability to get outside at any point during the working day, when it was fine enough. He could go and make private phone calls in the space of the garden, in a place where in his office he didn't have any privacy. Every morning when he arrived at work, his team would congregate out on the roof terrace and have a brainstorming session. And the idea was that they stood up, they were outside, they were connected with the outside, and he believed that it helped to generate ideas. They felt less self-conscious being outside than they might have been in the office space, and it promoted creative thinking. He also enjoyed the sensory nature of the space, the lavender, the smell, the contact with bees. He liked that physical engagement with the real, when in his working life he spent all his time on looking inside his computer, looking at his computer screen. And the most interesting thing he said to me was, and this was completely unprompted, he looked out at the view and he said, you know, what I really like about this space is the way in which I feel connected to my city. I'm a Londoner, I was brought up in London, and I like being outside looking at it and looking beyond and thinking about the world beyond, thinking about all the people who work in King across the ocean in the United States. So that he felt very much rooted and connected in his city by being able to access it from the outside. So an interesting discussion. So the evidence might suggest that, as James Corner has argued, landscape can no longer be considered as decoration around the base of buildings, and I've added or on the roof. Rather, it has come to assume deeper roles of contextualization, heightening experiences, and embedding time and nature in the built world. And thinking about John Palmer's experience of looking out into that, onto the city, onto the urban landscape of London, I came across this photograph of an Anthony Gormley sculpture looking out over New York, and it made me think that, you know, there is perhaps the benefit here of engaging with the urban or the suburban sublime by being out looking at the sky, having access to sky. Now, I think we all need sublime in our lives. We need that sort of sense of risk and fear and joy. Some of us get that through dancing the Argentinian tango. That might be a way of engaging the sublime. Others of us might get it through looking at the sky and at space. But it's possible that this idea of seeing tangible and infinite space can be something that meets our needs as human beings. So I am, as I say, putting together a proposal for funding for this project. And my proposal question at the moment is, to what extent do office gardens and recreation parks contribute to employee health, well-being, motivation and creativity, and how far do the spatial location and design of corporate landscapes accord with their use and effectiveness? So if any of you have any thoughts about that, I look forward very much to hearing them later on. Thank you.